Doesn't matter how long you've been gardening, how good you are, or how well prepared you are, things are going to go wrong. Sometimes it's a little thing, sometimes it feels like a massive disaster and the whole thing's being destroyed. So one of the big things with that is to ensure that you don't give up. And sometimes you can bounce back from it or just use it as a good springboard to do something else with. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that have happened to me, what I've done about it, and as well as that, I'll give you a look at where my garden is at the moment as well. So recently I went away on holidays for a few days. I had watered the garden. Everything was looking amazing and green and beautiful. I was really, really happy with it. Gave it some extra water because the days were going to be hot. You know, when I got back, I figured worse, things were going to be a little bit wilty looking and, you know, need a bit of a watering. Otherwise, they'd be perfectly fine. And what I actually came back to is an example of these couple of pictures here. Now that's apparently some kind of an aphid, like a orchid aphid or something along the oleander aphid. Don't know precisely what it was called. You can see it, look it up on Google if you like. But basically it managed to do enough damage in that period of time. It was like a swarm of locusts had come through. It was amazing in its destructive level and devastating in, well, its destructive level. So first and foremost is like, what the heck do you do about this? And that's one of the things that I wanted to figure out. So like everything, there's right ways, wrong ways, and in-between ways of doing it. I think I ended up somewhere along the in-betweens. One of the areas that I saw heaps of these was over here. This here where I've basically experimenting with some couple of different watermelons, beans, and so forth in here, trying to get them to climb and seeing what I can manage to get to work. Was actually swarming with them. Like I'd actually gotten up and, you know, doing something like this, and you could almost not breathe. It was insane how many of them came out. So me, in my infinite wisdom, I went back to the standard instinct of, well, you spray your stuff, and there's only one way of getting rid of things. So basically I pulled out the surface spray and I sprayed everything. So there was a couple of factors with that. One, it worked. It killed it all. Which was fantastic. Then, of course, the wise one in the family, my wife, looked that up. It was like, obviously, I didn't think about the dangers of surface spray at the time. I just wanted to kill these things that had destroyed my garden. And, well, it always says don't do that on plants because it can absorb the toxins into the plants, particularly the edible stuff. So I then had to take the next step of basically everything that was edible I had to rip out. I've taken the basic stand that all of the stuff that was basically plant only, nothing on it that's edible, I left alone, because in the most part, anything that is actually in there, I figured, is not going to have that much left by the time it has something edible on it. But all of the tomatoes and broccoli, which the broccoli wasn't working well for me anyway, my wombok, all of that had to come out, and my Malabar spinach, which was doing amazing. So had to annihilate all of that. However, the good news, there's the blueberries. Now in the picture, you'll have noticed they were annihilated leaves wise. So cleared the leaves up a bit, gave it some fertilizer and some good watering to make sure it was in nice good health. And as you can see, it's recovering really, really nicely. Like all this beautiful fresh growth coming back. So in its own way, it's actually done a good thing for it. So that's doing really nicely. I had recently started to transplant my strawberries over into these containers, which were a little bit more suited to overall looking after them and spacing. And as you may have seen from the pictures at the beginning, they were essentially annihilated. But I went through, trimmed all of the dead back, gave them a bit of TLC, and as you can see, some of them really did not care about the fact that I loved them and wanted them to live. However, yeah, it's not all bad. Some of them were a lot more resilient and went, oh, okay, cool. You want me to live and you've done something to help and I'm bouncing back. which is great. It also has taught me a little bit more about my strawberries. So some of the strawberries, say for whatever reason, it looks like the Tioga either does not like where I've put it, or it does not like being attacked and annihilated and bouncing back. So I suppose that's a lesson to learn in and of itself. I'm learning a bit more about these plants. Obviously, transplanting process can be a bit finicky for a lot of plants anyway. It doesn't matter how resilient they are, you will have a tendency to lose some plants in the transplanting process just because they don't like being moved. It's kind of fair enough. But as I also mentioned, my broccoli was a really, really weird plant. I think I should have taken some pictures and videos of it earlier on because the way it was growing made no sense to me. However, I had a horrible cabbage moth issue, so I needed to get rid of most of it anyway, so it was a blessing in disguise. So the other thing was my Malabar spinach, which is amazing. I will be doing a video on that later because it's actually an incredible one, and that's something I'm going to stick with going down the track. But let's have a look at where my garden is sitting now, since I ripped everything up and started to replant some new things. And you know, if you've been following me for a little while, hopefully you've actually seen some of my garden bed ones, and you know where things were at one point. And well, this is actually still a lot more advanced than my last video showed, so let's take a look. Okay, there's the strawberries that I showed you before. Got some zucchinis that I planted over here, largely because I had them left over from a different planting exercise and thought, oh well, see how they go. Looks like I've got a little bit of powdery mildew there I'm going to have to take care of. It's a really annoying thing, that. Corn, that's red okra there. Never actually tried it, given it a go. Some thyme that I transplanted over. Got some chickens getting around, and I have a feeling that they've decided to have a little dig. Which can be irritating, but oh well, it's what they do. Other than that, moved my herbs over here. They were pretty well untouched overall, but looks like they need a bit more water. We've had some rain, so this is the mulberry that I showed in my bonsai video way back. It's going really happily. But here I've redone the fence line around my main garden. As you can see, I've made myself a little gate, and here I've got mini capsicums which did have some fruit on them, but I've taken that off. Safety methods, same with my eggplants, but those are coming back really nicely. I've planted some new wombok, some bok choy. This is a gem squash which survived completely untouched, surprisingly, whereas my other gem squash got annihilated, like completely annihilated. Here I have planted a combination of beans and spaghetti squash, and I've thrown some seeds in for a couple of different tomato varieties as well, just to see what happens. And where the eggplant, that's some more red okra, to see how that goes. That seems very happy. I've planted some more, that's a mustard, spinach, cabbage stuff there, and some more spaghetti squash to see how that goes. My experimental combo pot there. Working on increasing and variations of what I'm putting into those hanging pots. This is celery I planted way back, so that was planted in that very first garden from that earliest video of my garden that I showed. And the spring onions, and here I've got zucchinis, as well as a random spaghetti squash in there as well. A pumpkin which I planted in this pot here, and it seems to be moving around quite happily. My hanging baskets here I'm having a go with, so that is a hanging version of rosemary, so that should, as it grows, if I can keep it alive, should start hanging over quite nicely. As you can see, it's starting to do it there. Thyme, lemon thyme, which is my personal favourite. Bleeding heart, this is a sort of a vine growing flower. Haven't figured out what to put in there. I did actually have strawberries in these. This is a semi-succulent, which is supposed to hang very nicely. Ooh, got a flower on it. Didn't have a flower when I put it in there a few days back. And then in here, some more shade liking. It's a fern variety. Ivy. I figured I'd actually give some ivy a go because it's supposed to grow just about anywhere, and I just want to see just how voracious it can actually be. Same version of the fern. Maidenhair, ivy, and a fuchsia. Probably not pronouncing that correctly. Mint and other stuff, and there's one more slightly exotic plants, so on and so forth. Having a go at orchids at the moment. This one seems to be going really well. Like, actually looks fake. It's actually real. Very, very happy with that. This is one that was basically almost dead, so it's the kind that generally gets thrown away, and I'm having a go at bringing that back. This one is actually in quite good health, despite the fact it doesn't actually look that fantastic at the moment, but I'm having a go at those. They're a little bit more finicky than your average plant, but that's my Buddha belly plant. I'll be doing something on these ones later. And that's the bat plant there. Impatience. Another impatience. Very interesting little plant. Just some various ones I'm looking after. Desert roses. Heap of those. Another selection of random ones I'm trying to basically grow, put together various experiments and so forth. I'll be doing some videos on some of this stuff later. Fruit trees. And then this one here. I'll be doing a video on these. That there is loofah. Fascinating plant. I'll be doing something on that later. Corn. Beans and so forth. There. Now, I did a video a while back on greenhouses, and the large greenhouse that I had in that video blew away. This is some time back now, but rather than giving up, I actually found that the frame I repurposed and basically made a good frame for pots out of. So as you can see, turn a disaster into an opportunity. If you were to buy yourself a frame like that, it would have cost more than my little greenhouse it actually cost me. So I'm working on figuring out what the best plants for that is. So a little while ago, I had several papaya that I'd grown from seeds in smaller pots. There was one in particular that I was very happy with. It was growing nice and strongly. I was just about ready to put it in a larger pot, and we had a very windy night that blew them all off the shelf that they were on. Now, in particular, this one snapped, which I was very upset about because some of the weaker and ones were perfectly fine. They hardly even lost soil out of the pot, which was crazy. But remembering that every plant actually wants to live, I just took that and thought, okay, well, hey, you know, I might get 2 plants out of this. So firstly, I repotted the main portion of the plant, and put a bit of cinnamon on the break to help with the potential fungus and so forth. And I put the broken portion, snipped it to a nice clean, put that in some water for a little bit just to see if it'd make it. The leaves were doing really well, so I then, after a little while, actually planted it in some soil to see whether or not it continued to make it. And this is the result. There it is. That's the primary plant that got replanted. If you didn't actually know what you're looking for, or that you're actually looking for something, you wouldn't really know. There it is, near where it broke and healed itself up. And there, that's the broken piece growing back. Not quite as striking a look as the other, but I've got 2 plants out of that. So there you have it. That is a look at my garden, and then some of the things that you can do with things that go wrong, and hopefully that's giving you a little bit of inspiration and realization that when stuff goes wrong, it's not always the end of the world. Just find something to do with it and move on. Keep on gardening, enjoy it.